Hello and welcome to the virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken, and I'm joined by Bill.
Bill Leon, not Bill Arsenault. He could not be with us tonight.
For a second, I thought you were going to say he's no longer with us.
Oh, no.
And we will be joined a little later by Hawk Ripjaw. So, we have a somewhat abbreviated episode here today. Not a whole lot of movies to talk about, so we're going to fill it with a couple of extra things. First of all, I know I'm probably the only one on the pubcast who actually has watched all of Game of Thrones, and I just finished rewatching it from the beginning over the last couple of... I was kind of spurred on because I have a couple of friends who are just, like, they feel that the final season ruined the show for them, and I didn't get that when I saw the final season. I was like, you know what? I'm fine with this. It's not everything I envisioned it could be, but it was perfectly entertaining. And I chatted with Zach, and he agrees with me, by the way. So it's not like, and Zach is a choosy individual when it comes to TV show finales. I have to say he's a person who is easily turned off by that. So I'm going to take that as you know, I think that there's just a lot of negative response to the fact that their people, their favorite character, didn't get what they wanted or something. But either way, it's controversial, and admittedly, it didn't do... The last season of Game of Thrones was a 6-episode abbreviated season, and they didn't get everything absolutely stellar, but I think the important things they hit, and overall, having watched it from beginning to end, I think it holds up really well, especially as a binge show. So I'm not here to talk, though, about Game of Thrones. I'm here to talk about The Last Watch, which is a documentary that they put out a week after the final episode aired. And it's a nearly 2-hour documentary about the making of this final season. And it's very interesting in terms of making-ofs, in that a lot of those making-ofs, especially when they're produced by the station or the movie company that produced the original, they have that EPK feel, like where you really only get an idea of what they want. You only see what they want you to see. This is interesting in that it takes a very unique focus. While a few actors who are stars on the show do show up in a few scenes, the primary focus of The Last Watch is about the blue-collar, everyday working dudes, who mostly Northern Irishmen and Irish women, who showed up to do their small piece of the puzzle to make the biggest show ever created, bigger. And I say biggest show just because budgetarily, I'm pretty sure this is the most expensive show ever made. HBO just blew money left and right because the show was popular and ambitious and creative. And I really enjoyed this documentary because its focus is on these people who, they'll never have their name in lights. They'll be in the end credits and in small portions, and in some cases, not even that. And these are the people who really make the show happen. You have the costume designers, you have the makeup people, you have the lady who has a shop that makes grilled sandwiches that's right outside, and like she invented a sandwich that's now like super popular over there, specifically because she was just looking for a way to make some money, feeding crew members. And one of my favorites is this one character who he's a longtime stuntman. He's been a stuntman in the industry for about 30 years, and for Game of Thrones, he came on as a stunt coordinator, and they gave him his shot to play a actual somewhat starring role as the lead of this group of sort of zombified ice creatures. He as the Night King. It's not a role that he'll ever be famous for because his face is completely covered in makeup.
For those of you who clicked on this video looking for a Spider-Man Far From Home review, you're going to have to wait. I apologize to you for that.
Well, and here's the thing.
I'm just being like a J to your Mike with the Star Trek, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it. This is all going over your head, but I
Well,
find
I understand. Like, it's the same thing. Like, I'm not into Lord of the Rings, but I understand that like they went to a very specific part of the world, and a lot of people that worked on it. Like I get it. I understand what you're saying, and that's great. I would probably enjoy this documentary more than I enjoy the show.
You might. I mean, if anything, just there's some very unique characters. There's this one person whose entire job is spraying snow all over the sets.
That's fun.
Like fake snow. Yeah. And then an actual snowstorm comes through, and it's bedlam because the real snow is not as filmable as the fake snow, and the storm is so heavy that they actually have to suspend production, and he has to move all of the snow he's already set down to another area. Just a lot of weird bullshit that they go through. And there's this wonderful little subplot involving this makeup company that was put together by by this couple who just happened to win their bid for HBO, and suddenly they have to come up with all of this really crazy makeup work, even though they didn't even have a studio at the time they won the bid. They basically just said, we can do this, and HBO said, all right. And so you get to see as their makeup work, which by the way is stellar, comes together. And there's some wonderful bits in this documentary that give you a feel of the culture of Northern Ireland. And another very interesting character in this documentary is a guy who has been an extra on the series for 5 years running and is almost a little too into the show, because he's to the point where he knows the house, the royal house the noble house that he belongs to as an extra, and he's like giving shit to everyone else who's not part of that group.
I know my Hogwarts house.
Yeah, so it's sort of like that.
Hawk Ripjo's joined us, everybody.
So I don't have too much else that I want to say about this film, other than if you are a fan of the series, I would say this is a must-watch. If you're not a fan of the series,
I do. Well, not to cut you off, but I am interested. You just called it a film. Would you consider this more of like a film, like this stands on its own, than like DVD extra?
Oh, absolutely. This is
supplemental feature to Game of Thrones.
This is a full-blown documentary that chronicles the making of the last season of this show, but it does so by exploring angles that are very cinematic and unusual. There's an arc to certain storylines that are, and when I say storylines, actual people's lives are chronicled. Mm-hmm. Okay. And since the focus is less so on the celebrity characters and more on like the work, the everyday crew members who show up to do things, it gives a whole new level of appreciation for the show that even if you're not a fan of the show, you might be interested to watch just to get an idea of the ridiculous amount of shit that goes into making an expensive TV series, and everyone whose life is forever changed by it.
Well, you're not wrong, but I think as far as what you've described to me of the contents of this documentary, it's not so much that, it's more like fantasy epics and the fact that people do have to go to these like European countries to film them.
Well, I see where you're coming from with that. First of all, Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand, which is nowhere near Europe. But
okay, I don't know continents, but you know what I mean.
New Zealand also not a continent, but that's just me giving you shit.
I wasn't calling Europe. Europe is the continent I was referring to.
And if you really want to be technical, calling Europe a continent is questionable, considering it's really part of Asia, and Eurasia is a more accurate way. To call Europe a continent is... but that's my geography stuff coming through, and my dad was a geography teacher, so this is me being a little bit shitty. So anyway, I I think that it's an interesting show to watch, and as a documentary that's about a making of a show goes, it's interesting. It's not like, say, Hearts of Darkness, where you literally get to see a filmmaker melt down over the course of the shooting of Apocalypse Now, or
what's that? The Duffy, not the Boondock Saints guy.
Overnight is the name of that movie.
Overnight, yeah. Which, I mean, yeah, those are fascinating documentaries, but
and then there's also the Werner Herzog documentary, Burden of Dreams, which is it's a documentary about the making of his film Fitzcarraldo. Of course, it's directed by Les Blanc, and that is also another film that is a wonderful making of documentary that just explores the insane amount of obsession that some of these filmmakers have, and whereas this is not, of course, it doesn't rise to the level of Burden of Dreams or Hearts of Darkness or even, say,
Overnight.
Overnight. But I was about to say, I'm trying to remember what is the name of the man who killed Don Quixote documentary that.
Oh man, I don't remember what it's titled.
Shit. Well, anyway, same thing. It's you know, you don't see people melt down in this, but it's more about how people team up and make something work, despite the fact that they have less money than a movie to do a movie level of quality for 6 episodes. Basically, they made 6 movies for the budget of 1 or 2 really big, expensive movies. And it's in a third of the time.
It's funny that you're reviewing this and you never really gave your thoughts on the final episodes of Game of Thrones. I mean, you kind of did in the beginning, but you never got in depth with it. This, like you said, it's all these quaint little people that just live. It's like when Hollywood comes to town, essentially, like in New Orleans or in Philadelphia or this or that. Like, people end up getting jobs on big budget projects just because they happen to be shooting in a very specific place. So exactly. This intrigues me. I would definitely be interested to see, to take in the environment that this was all shot in.
Well, to put this in perspective, so Game of Thrones, the hub of Game of Thrones is Belfast in Northern Ireland. And for those unfamiliar with the geographics and the history of that region, Belfast is a city that until fairly recently in history was basically right on the borderline, the war zone between Northern Ireland and Ireland proper. And that was basically that is where the Troubles, the unofficial war between Great Britain and Ireland took place, where you had the Protestants and the Catholics committing acts of terror against each other for decades. And it's kind of the definition of a war-torn area in its own way. And only in the last 15, 20 years has it started to pick itself up, because there was a truce that was declared in, I believe, the late 90s, early 2000s. I forget the exact time frame on that. And so a project like this getting shot there is a big deal for them, and it brings in a lot of money to the economy of this very working class town. And so seeing this community kind of come together in the name of creating art is really fascinating. Anyway, other than that, I know I haven't really officially shared my thoughts of the final season of Game of Thrones, short of saying that I was fairly satisfied with it. I'm just going to summarize and say...
Don't spoil anything.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil anything.
I'm only on 3.
I think it's worth watching. That's really all I'm going to say.
I mean, I'm already on season 3. I can't just stop.
Yeah, no, you really
I gotta finish it.
Yeah, and consider this. You're on season 3. There are 8 seasons, and 2 of those seasons are abbreviated. Like the last season was 7 episodes, and this one's 6. So really, you've only got a couple of 10-episode seasons left, and then you're in the end game.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and leave it at that. And I'm very interested to hear, Billy, on your. It's time for you to pitch me on a show that I watched the first season of, and I haven't since. Tell me about Stranger Things.
Now I will. Yeah, I will preface. I'm not going to just talk about season 3. I'm going to talk about 2 and 3, but I will try to keep those spoiler free. If you have not seen Stranger Things season 1, shut off this video and go watch it, because it is really solid. There's a reason that it captured so many people's attention when it came out. Stranger Things season 2 and 3 have a lot of great moments regarding the story, but at the same time, I feel like the story has more or less taken a back seat, and it's more just like, aren't these actors great together? I'm fucking muted. No, I'm not.
No, I'm hearing you.
I thought I was muted the whole time I was talking. So really, I think the strengths of seasons 2 and 3 have been just how well these actors have chemistry with each other, and the way they write the characters and the character interactions. Like the big mystery story of like the Upside Down and Elle's backstory and stuff, like that's not why I love the show. It's just like, oh, I love seeing this cast together, regardless of what stupid shit they have them do, because there was a lot. And in fact, both seasons I've seen a lot of fans, they're very vocal with their complaints and or what they like, what they don't like, and it's every show has that, but with Stranger Things, it's like there's no unanimous opinion on seasons 2 and 3. There are things that people love. Those same things are the same things that people are, oh, this is where the show's starting to go downhill, Hawk, have you watched Stranger Things season 2?
I don't know if he was listening. Hawk, are you there?
Yeah, I don't know if he's there. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I don't want to spoil either season, because I know especially you, Ken, have not seen them, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone listening either.
So I wanted to say that I have seen season 1. I have seen the season 2 recap that prefaces season 3, and I've seen the very end of season 3 because I was unlucky enough to enter the room at 2 very inopportune moments. So I know how both season 2 and season 3 end.
Right.
Which is pretty funny. Now, I will say that the recap of season 2 at the beginning of 3 was like, holy shit, I need to watch season 2 as soon as I finish the other 5 shows that I'm watching, because it looks awesome.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun. And again, I really believe that the cast and how they write the characters is key, because at this point, I there's no mystery to anything. Like the hard element of mystery that was like the lifeblood of season 1 is pretty much gone. But the foundation of that, when these characters they created and the actors they cast in the roles, like that's really what kept me coming back, especially for season 3. And I keep seeing all these ridiculous articles about like Netflix promises to cut down on people smoking cigarettes in Stranger Things season 4. I'm like, why is this an issue? It takes place in the 80s. Like, are people really? Oh my God, I can't watch someone smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, it should absolutely not be an issue. Simply, first of all, people smoke like chimneys now. It doesn't matter what message you're sending, if there's smoking in it or not. Because
it's so stupid. It's so stupid.
I will say I can't say that I approve of smoking, but I also know that people do, and there's nothing you're going to do to stop it. So what the fuck ever.
I'm going to clarify that really quick though. Netflix, their official statement was that they are going to not have smoking in PG-13 and TV-14 and under properties unless it is thematically or historically relevant.
I think it. Well, like
For example, if they put out a PG-13 rated Winston Churchill movie, then Winston Churchill would still smoke because it was part of who he was.
I said, the only thing of Stranger Things that I intend to spoil here is season 1. So if you have not seen season 1, cut this video off, go check it out. Ken, you have seen season 1 of Stranger Things, correct?
Yes.
The character of Sheriff Hopper, like his whole thing is that he lost his daughter. He's a broken man. Like he's kind of sarcastic, but like it makes sense for him to chain smoke.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
I would argue that is thematically part of why there is a lot of smoking in Stranger Things. Like almost every time it's used as like the same way people positively look at smoking marijuana nowadays. Like I just need to take the edge off real quick, you know. Joyce Byers' character, her son is missing, and there's a scene in season 1 where she bums a cigarette off of Hopper and shit. So, like, it's absolutely ridiculous to me that people are making this into a thing. Another thing, and I won't. It's hard to get into this without getting into spoilers, but I will not spoil anything of Stranger Things. Rachel Lee Cook, is that her name?
I think so.
Yeah.
She went off on Twitter about a specific subject, about toxic masculinity, and I really don't agree with what she had to say about it. Like I understand what she was saying made sense, but it didn't apply to her reaction to Stranger Things. Like her whole thing was Hopper again. There's a whole thing with 3 where because of his tragic backstory he kind of starts neglecting people, but there's also a recurring element in season 3 of Hopper just being completely unhinged and fighting, like being combative with everyone he comes across who doesn't see eye to eye with him, and you know, so like it made sense to me, and I don't understand like it's crazy how many headlines Stranger Things season 3 is making right now. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Kind of.
Okay.
I do want to say that this show consistently reminds me how good Peter Gabriel's version of Heroes is.
Well, yeah, you saw the ending. That was a good cover.
Years.
Also regular show beat them to using the David Bowie original. And that was a great finale. But
I don't know. Like I love the David Bowie version, but I will just say again, without spoiling anything, that the way they use it in the finale of Stranger Things season 3 was really emotional.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, that
even without any context, that was a pretty emotional and very well put together finale, even though I have no idea what happened. Like, I don't even know which characters did what or anything. I have no context for the ending. I just like the way it was shot and the way that the song contributed to that ending.
Season 2 introduces these 2 new characters, Maxine and Billy, who are stepbrother, stepsister. And I won't, but all I'm going to say about it is that, like, they nailed it, introducing new characters into a show that everybody was so familiar with. Like, I'm sure Game of Thrones has been very successful at doing the same thing. I do enjoy the fact that, like, Stranger Things, despite the fact that it will take on these, like, supernatural, more serious stories, like, there's always time to let the kids be kids. And it does sort of take you to this nostalgic place, even though I didn't grow up in the 80s. Like, the kids in the show are so good at playing off of each other, portraying their friendship, and it just takes you back to, like, oh man, I remember when I was a little kid, and you know, this group of friends was, you know, the only thing that mattered, and we were always there for each other.
There was a time, it's a time that occurs, I think, in most kids' lives, although it's less and less common now. But it's that age where you're old enough that your parents trust you to go out and do things, but you're not old enough to have your own car, and so you have just neighborhoods to wander.
Mm-hmm.
And
Meet the kids, yeah, and
yeah,
it's sort of an our gang situation.
right, exactly. And it's something you take for granted, when you're actually a kid and doing it. But you look back and you're like, that was a really freeing time in its own way.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't think I have too much else to say outside of commenting on the story elements of seasons 2 and 3, which I don't want to do. So, if you like season 1, I urge you with it. But again, keep in mind what I said. Like, sometimes the story takes turns that are either you're not going to agree with, or you're just going to be like, this is kind of stupid. But at the same time, like, the actors and the characters are still there, and that's what's important for television. In a movie, I can understand people getting mad about stuff, but it's just like, the next episode, it's fine. And that's my take on Stranger Things. Great cast, great characters, chemistry's off the charts. Check it out.
Right.
Speaking of like 80s stuff, I did want to briefly spend a couple minutes on, since I was not here last week, on Annabelle Comes Home.
Oh yeah.
Because I know that neither one of you are really super big Conjuring fans.
I saw the second one. Actually, I think I saw both of them. I reviewed the second one on the show. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember if I saw the first one, but the second one was like, again, I would compare it to Stranger Things. Like, yeah. I like the cast and their characters, but at the same time, the story was kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, the story of The Conjuring 2 was fine. I mean, I think that movie is good mostly because it's got some really well-crafted scares, and I think the climax is really, really exciting.
I feel bad because I don't remember the name of the actor that plays the wife. I know Patrick Wilson plays
Vera Farmiga.
Okay, I'm not even familiar with who that is, but I liked them as a couple, like the whole ghost hunter shit that they were doing, and Patrick Wilson is just
he's good.
He needs more work doing eccentric shit.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Aquaman, right?
Oh yeah, he is in that.
Aquaman, and he's terrific as the bad guy in that movie.
I didn't love Aquaman, but yeah, he was over the top, and
Aquaman's bad, but it's like the right kind of bad. Like, it's James Wan it's James Wan. It's the director of The Conjuring 2 and Conjuring 1. He made a corny 80s movie, and he's firmly in his wheelhouse with that kind of
I didn't think of it that way, yeah. And I just watched Last Starfighter today, so that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so if I would suggest that you rewatch Aquaman at some point and reframe it. This is how I pitch Aquaman to people that are skeptical on it. I say James Wan took $130 million and made a corny 80s movie on a modern budget, and that's totally what it is. But as far as the Conjuring movies, The Conjuring 2 I thought was really intense. It was scary, but not like I wasn't going to have nightmares or anything after I watched it. It was in the moment very frightening, and with a great climax that had really huge stakes and potential deaths and stuff like that. Annabelle Comes Home is kind of like an Amblin style, Stranger Things style haunted house movie. It's still rated R for some reason. It's not really that violent. Nobody dies. I don't really think it needed to be rated R. There's not even that much profanity. I think it could have been a PG-13. I really don't even know why it's R. There's like a couple of bloody images of like characters that have died, like they're ghosts, but it's nothing that's really that big of a deal that you haven't seen somewhere else, like in a Disney movie. But
so much blood in Disney movies.
Well, I mean, you think I guess like violence, right?
I'm just being sarcastic. Don't worry about it.
Well, in Avengers Endgame, Thanos gets his head cut off, and you see blood spurting out of the stump, right?
I don't remember blood spurting out of the stump.
There was blood spurting out of the stump. Trust me. In the hologram, the Thanos watches from Nebula to her hologram that she said, right? Yeah, there's blood coming out of the stump. Trust me. So basically, the plot of Annabelle Comes Home is it's after the events of the first scene in the first Conjuring, where the Warrens, they take the Annabelle doll back to their house and lock it in the case because it's a conduit for evil spirits. And their daughter is at home, and then they hire a babysitter, and the babysitter's friend comes over, and the babysitter's friend decides to let the Annabelle doll out of the decides to open the cage or open the case, and then they're locked. The two babysitters and the girl, the daughter, are locked in the house while all hell breaks loose in terms of spirits. So this is kind of like a quote unquote bottle episode of the Conjuring franchise. It's kind of inconsequential. It doesn't really move the needle in terms of the franchise. It sets up a lot of new lore for the franchise, and we're probably going to get a couple of spin-offs based on new monsters that show up in this movie. But apart from that, it's not really much of anything impactful for the Conjuring franchise. And I think that's kind of a good thing.
For those who enjoy the Conjuring franchise.
For those that enjoy the Conjuring franchise. And I know, Ken, you're not really big on the franchise, because which ones have you seen?
I've seen The Conjuring and Conjuring Part 2, and I liked neither of them. So,
what did you not like about them?
Well, let's see. They don't stick in my mind very much. As to the film craft, I didn't find them particularly that scary. They lean pretty heavily on jump scares, I felt. And I really do not like the concept of these. Well, you know what? I'm going to just put this out on Front Street. Paranormal horror in general is a very hard sell for me because I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe perpetuating the existence of ghosts as a thing is a healthy thing. And it annoys the hell out of me when people claim that they actually have seen ghosts because they're always lying. And you can always find a definite hole in their story. And so there's partially some bias for me against paranormal horror. There are exceptions. I would say Babadook counts as paranormal horror, and that worked. Oculus wasn't bad.
These are mostly demons, though.
Yeah, I guess demonic horror is a little bit different, but I don't know. It just and the whole thing of like,
what's that one by Alan Parker that is Robert De Niro?
Oh God, are you talking Angel Heart? Is that
the one? That was a good movie.
I don't know.
I think that's Robert De Niro with Angel Heart. Yeah.
Anyway, point being, it's just not for me, I guess. And I'm not really sold on him as a filmmaker. Like the movies he's directed outside of that, I'm not really that big of a fan of either. So,
you don't like Furious 7?
I don't like what?
Furious 7?
Well, okay, so I'm also on board with the not on board with the Fast and Furious franchise. So
you're missing out. Okay,
I'm sure I am.
Which of the Fast and Furious movies have you seen?
I've seen Furious 7.
Oh, so you don't like? Okay.
I've seen Fast and Furious 6.
You guys argued about this.
6
on
Fast,
this
6
show.
Furious. Yeah. Fast 5. And I saw the original, and I don't like any of them. To
be fair, I don't like any of the Fast and Furious movies 1 through 4 all that much. Tokyo Drift is okay. 4 is terrible. 2 is terrible. 1 is forgettable. Fast 5 is great.
2 is funny though. I like 2.
2 is funny. 2 is kind of funny. It's 2 is like where 2 is really stupid, and then it kind of dialed back a little bit for 3, and it was just boring for 4, and then 5 was like, you know what? It's an action series now. And then I saw an extended trailer.
You know what it is? It's the and I'm trying to think of a way to say this. There are two kinds of car chase movies. There are car chase movies that have a story behind them, and there are car chase movies that are all about the car chase. And I don't like the ones that are just all about spectacle car chases. If a movie has a really great car chase in it, that's cool. It needs to have more than that, though. And these movies have nothing more than that, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, you're totally missing. No offense, you're totally missing a lot of what these movies are doing. But
I'm sure I am. That's not for me.
that is neither here nor there at this point, because my Annabelle comes home.
Yeah.
So yes, the house is locked down. It's filled with evil spirits, and these three young girls have to survive the night. So it's essentially, I described it as an R-rated episode of Scooby-Doo, because that's really what it feels like. It is a haunted house movie through and through. It is honestly really fun. It's got moments of comedy, but not a whole lot of it. But it's just it's got a sense of fun about it. Well, it also kind of takes itself seriously, and that's kind of a delicate balancing act, but it works. In terms of the jump scares, there are a lot of them, but a couple of times the movie kind of plays with it a little bit. So in the opening scene, the Warrens are taking the Annabelle doll home, and now we're on the third or fourth movie that feature the Warrens, and Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are very, very comfortable in their characters, very comfortable with their chemistry, and there's a very warm, very, very strong sense of warmth to these characters and how they interact with each other. Like, you can tell they're a very loving couple, that they are right for each other.
And they're dumb enough to keep an entire room full of dangerous relics in their house, and for no reason.
Well, that's
the reason is
the logic.
The reason is it creates another sequel.
No, hold on. Okay, you're being unfair.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, how many old school cheesy horror films have that same exact premise? Like,
Oh, no, I get it. I am being a little unfair, and that's, again, I don't like these movies, so feel free to
like, what's that, like, Tales from the Hood? He had all that shit in his fucking mansion. Like, come on.
First of all, Tales from the Hood is a shitty movie.
All right,
It's got 2 or 3 moments in it that are entertaining, but
we like it.
So, all right, so just their room full of objects the objects are all things that have been involved in supernatural events. The Annabelle doll is the conduit for the events, and when they keep it locked in the case, nothing's going to happen. Everything's fine, and they also have the room blessed once a week. So in terms of the lore of the franchise, it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to have this room full of stuff, because it's safer to have it there, because they have it blessed. The room is locked with like 4 or 5 different locks.
They haven't thought of do they talk about destroying them?
A lot of them. So they talk about destroying them. The Annabelle doll is mentioned to have. They mention maybe destroying it, but then that would. They say that would make it worse, like that would make the spirit that inhabits it more angry. Like, I don't remember the specifics, but the movie does kind of explore that possibility. They don't discount that idea, but it's brought up, and the movie explains why they should not do that. So they are thinking of stuff like that, the things that people might mention. Okay, I lost track of my train of thought. Okay, yeah, so they're taking the doll home, and so the movie kind of plays the jump scares a little bit at that point. So, they stop outside of a cemetery because the car has broken down, and that's always like a setup for a scary thing. And Elizabeth Warren pulls out her map, and there's this very obvious shot where there's a side shot of her sitting in the car, and she pulls the map up, and it covers the entire passenger side window. And she's looking at it, and you hear a rising music, and you're like, oh my God, she's going to move the map, and there's going to be something behind the map. And she does, and there's nothing there. And there are a few moments like that where the movie is very obviously setting up a jump scare, and then it doesn't happen, and then it gets you a few seconds later after that.
I'm just imagining Elizabeth Warren, the senator, for some reason. I don't know why.
Maybe it's not Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren is the senator from Massachusetts.
I think it'd be Elaine Warren.
Okay.
I think it's. Hold on.
It probably is. I mean, there could be more than one Elizabeth. But...
Sorry, Ed and Lorraine.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Lorraine is holding up the map to the window, and you think that something's going to be behind the map when she pulls it down, but there's nothing there. So there are moments like that where you think there's going to be a jump scare and there's not. And then there are other moments where you think there's going to be a jump scare, and there totally is. But they're earned in a good way. Like it's so one of my favorite scenes in the movie is I don't. So the setup is that the ferryman, right? When a spirit is going to go to the underworld, you place a coin over their coins over both their eyes as the toll for the ferryman to take them to the underworld. You guys know of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The ferryman is an actual spirit in the house, or that shows up in the house. So there's this whole sequence where all the lights in the house are out, and the babysitter is walking around with a flashlight, and she's moving the flashlight around. She keeps hearing coins dropping, and they roll towards her. And then, she moves the flashlight away, and then over at the end of the hall, there's 2 glowing coins floating in the air. And she moves her flashlight there, and both the coins fall from the air and roll towards her. And then, she sees the coins again, and then she moves closer, and then boom, he's right there in her face. So that was a really fun scene, just in the way it was shot, the way it was.
Is the ferryman really angry just because he doesn't have a coin purse, so he keeps dropping his shit?
They fall out of his eyes every time the flashlight shines on him.
Just give him a coin purse; he'll be happy.
It really plays with it's like, oh, there's a TV in the room that shows what's going to happen a couple of seconds into the future, and you see a picture of a very bloody. One of the girls is very, very bloody because she reaches for a phone that was ringing, and then in the real world, the phone starts ringing. So there's that suspense of her almost reaching for it and seeing what happens to her, and then she gets interrupted. There is a possessed samurai armor, a possessed projector, a possessed this and that, and it's just the movie really plays with just a bunch of really goofy things being possessed and evil. There is a side character who is a guy who likes the babysitter character, and he's trying to serenade her outside of the house, and then a werewolf comes out of nowhere and attacks him. It's just like there's this kind of this goofy tone to the movie that balances with the sinisterness of the subject matter, and it really feels like an 80s style Amblin type thing if Amblin ever tried to go for a much more mature tone.
Well, Poltergeist.
Sure, yeah, Poltergeist. Was Poltergeist Amblin?
Pretty sure, yeah. I mean, it was produced by Steven Spielberg.
Rumored to have been directed by him as well.
Yeah. That I don't fully believe that, but yeah, I mean, it does have a lot of Spielbergian elements.
Let me see. I'm actually curious now. But I mean, when I say Amblin, regardless of whether or not Poltergeist was Amblin, I mean Amblin in terms of the Amblin brand, like kids and family-friendly, scary stuff.
Poltergeist again. Yeah, it's like PG.
It is PG, but
with exception of the scene where a guy's face gets kind of torn off, it's pretty family friendly.
And the face being torn off is a little more graphic than anything else that's in Annabelle Comes Home. I do want to say there's an interesting character thing where the babysitter's friend who wants to get into the house or into the room full of possessed objects. At first, the movie sets it up as a sort of thing where, like, oh, this character's just a shitty person and she's stupid and she wants to just see because she's curious. But in reality, it's revealed later in the film that her dad is dead because he was killed in a car accident, which we learned early on. But then we learn later that he was killed in a car accident and she was driving. She wasn't drunk or anything like that. It's just like it was a car accident. Nobody was at fault, but she was driving and she blames herself for everything. And she wants to believe that the Warrens can communicate with the dead because she wants to talk to her father one last time and get his forgiveness. And it was a really interesting character moment learning that because it actually gave her a very concrete reason for wanting to break into the house, into the room and see the possessed objects instead of just, oh, this stupid character is going to set off the events of the movie. So there was a really good intelligence to how they played that character piece out. Looking at the Poltergeist page, I'm seeing that it was produced by SLM Production Group and Metro Goldwyn Mayer. So it was MGM, and I don't see Amblin on there at all.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either. Although that said, Spielberg was pretty much like, I mean, he and Tobe Hooper were direct collaborators on the film, and Spielberg was the producer. So while not Amblin, considering Amblin was Spielberg's baby, that's the feeling is there.
I also do want to point out that Poltergeist was PG on appeal. It originally got rated R.
Well, hey, they didn't have PG-13 at the time, so
Right, because Poltergeist was what, 82?
That was before PG-13.
Right, PG-13 was 84. That was because of Gremlins and Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Maybe
Gremlins
Temple
and
of Doom.
Temple of Doom were. And by the way, Gremlins, another movie where Steven Spielberg has some influence.
And
Yes.
Gremlins was Chris Columbus, wasn't it?
He wrote it. The director was Joe Dante.
Oh, that's right. Okay. But yeah, that's Annabelle Comes Home. It's weirdly a fun movie. Like I had a good time watching it.
When you say it really quickly like that, it sounds like you said Animal Comes Home.
Annabelle.
I know. Say it really fast like that, it sounds like Animal.
That's
I was thinking
the Muppet movie that we have.
the Muppet. Yeah, that's exactly.
Oh man, I would
Animal Comes Home.
order for a Animal Comes. I would love to see a Muppets movie where Animal is the main character.
And it's a horror movie, a paranormal horror movie.
Well, they are coming out with the Banana Splits horror movie.
Oh,
No,
God.
I think an animal movie would be like a fish out of water type thing where he has to he has to be like a butler at the Queen's castle or something like that.
He just fucks it up because he's like, yeah,
He he takes a bite out of the serving tray and shit like that.
he's trying to drum on everything.
Yeah.
Dr. Teeth Dr. Teeth is getting presented like an honorary knighthood, and
He's getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
One of my favorite animal moments in the Muppets is in The Great Muppet Caper, which I will die on the hill that is the best Muppet movie. Yeah.
All right.
I'm a defender of the Muppet Christmas Carol, but go ahead.
These are all discussions that are not appropriate for.
I know, right? But just real quick, like it's instead of an MGM logo, it's animal in the middle of an MGM type logo, and he starts eating it. He's like, "Wow!" And he starts taking huge bites out of the MGM logo outline where the lion usually is, and
That'd
then
be pretty cool.
and that's the whole intro of The Great Muppet Caper.
I'm okay with you liking that movie as the best, as long as you don't think that the one with Gonzo as like a spaceman.
Muppets from Space.
Yeah, Muppets from Space. That movie.
That's not even a Muppet movie, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that movie's some bullshit.
Yeah, that is bullshit.
Pretty sure Oh, That Bird is a better Muppet movie.
Wow.
The Muppets Most Wanted is a better Muppet movie than Muppets in Space.
I like that one.
Yeah, Muppets Most Wanted wasn't great, but it's fine.
You're listening to Muppet Talk.
Like evil Kermit dancing on his own without a hand up his ass was like really creepy.
So Spider-Man: Far From Home.
That's the log line for the DVD cover of Muppets Most Wanted, by the way.
Are we skipping Midsummer?
Oh no, we'll do Midsummer last.
Midsummer's last.
Oh, okay.
So Spider-Man: Far From Home, also known for me as Spider-Man: Far From My Favorite MCU movie.
A lot of
I
people.
liked
How does? Never mind.
Here's the thing.
Far From Home is my third favorite Spider-Man movie.
Okay.
First favorite being Into the Spider-Verse, second favorite being Spider-Man 2,
Spider-Man 2.
and now third favorite Far From Home. I really enjoyed it.
I didn't. I thought it was okay, and I can't come to terms with this movie getting some of the reviews it's gotten. I feel like this movie is a clear example of why the Marvel formula is getting stiff.
Okay.
And well, first of all, we should go with what is Spider-Man: Far From Home about?
Okay, so Spider-Man: Far From Home is does take place after Endgame, so you have a little bit of Peter dealing with the grief of losing Tony Stark in Endgame. He and his class go to on a European science trip with their class, part of a class thing. And meanwhile, Nick Fury and Colby Smulders, whose character name I can't remember.
Maria Hill.
Maria Hill, yeah. They're dealing with elementals, these big, elemental creatures, and they're being assisted by Mysterio, who is an off-world hero played by Jake Gyllenhaal.
Well, he comes from another version of Earth.
Right, there's a multiverse, and he comes from a different version of Earth, and his family was killed on his other Earth, and he's coming here to save this Earth from the elementals. And then Peter is recruited forcibly by Nick Fury to help fight the elementals with Mysterio.
Can I just say, by the way, I hesitate to call spoilers on this movie simply because you will have everything figured out the moment Mysterio makes his first appearance.
Call spoilers for the listeners, but as far as my ears are concerned, you can spoil the shit out of this.
Yeah.
So spoilers right now. Spoilers at the part.
We don't have timestamps for Google Hangouts. We don't know, but
spoilers. If you're listening right now, spoilers.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'm calling this movie spoiler-proof simply because if you can't tell Jake Gyllenhaal is going to be the main villain from his first fucking appearance in the movie...
also, he's Mysterio, and it's Spider-Man fans.
Okay, no, let's be fair, though, is that I think the movie kind of does a decent job at making you think... The trailers did, too, and I applaud them, because... as far as this whole thing is concerned with Spider-Man and Sony,
can I just say I had no idea who Mysterio was going into this movie?
Okay, and you still called it?
And I called it immediately.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of context. Sony owns Spider-Man. Marvel is subcontracting Spider-Man, for lack of a better term. The way the whole business thing works, as far as I know, is that Marvel has creative control over making a Spider-Man movie. Sony gets all the profits. They also are responsible for marketing. That is why the poster for Spider-Man Far From Home was fucking terrible. It was terrible. You guys have both seen this poster, right?
Is it the one that's currently on Wikipedia, which has like Spider-Man standing at an angle and then Nick Fury on one side and Jake Gyllenhaal on the other? And
there's like either a spider logo or a triangle around them?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not a good poster.
It looks like shit. The first time it came out, I was like, what the fuck am I looking at? So in any case, the reason I say that is because you would have thought that Sony might have spilt the beans on Mysterio in their trailers, but they didn't. And in the comics, Mysterio's whole MO is that he's a Hollywood special effects artist who will create these gigantic illusions and then swoop in as the hero and look like he saved the day. And then Spider-Man pulls the curtain back and reveals him as a fraud, and Quentin Beck becomes incredibly vengeful and wants to ruin Spider-Man's life and or kill him. So they kind of reflect that in this movie, but the trailers kind of framed him as potentially a hero, like maybe he really is an interdimensional hero, and they're kind of disregarding what's in the comics. But I'm interested that the fact that you called it right away, Ken, without even knowing the context of the comics.
So first of all, before I even saw Mysterio, the elemental creature, the first one that appears, my first thought immediately was, we haven't heard of these things before. This is like a completely generic creature. The whole concept of, because the first elemental we see is like a storm creature or something like that.
Like a stone. It's in Mexico, and it's made out of rocks.
Oh yeah. Well, we don't. The rock. Do we see the rock one first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whichever. The point is, it just felt like, to me, it was one of those things where I was like, this is like a really bargain basement villain for this movie, and so my thought went to, okay, so these can't be the actual villains. There has to be something deeper behind this. And then the moment Jake Gyllenhaal makes his appearance and saves the day, I'm like, okay, this guy is putting everyone on, because there's everything about him bleeds dishonesty.
At this point, though, yeah, but I think like movies have kind of interfered with that, like The Incredibles and Megamind and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that. It's just, and here's the thing: I don't want to take anything from Jake Gyllenhaal. He does his best
well,
with the material he's given. I just feel like it was, it would have been more effective if they had, made the creatures more believable as standalone villains, as opposed to something that was clearly being controlled by another force. Because that immediately made me think, why haven't we been introduced to the villain, or to something like something pulling the puppet strings? And it was such an obvious move to me. And the whole thing of like Peter Parker seeing, being like everything being done through holograms. It's another thing. It's an issue I've had with the MCU for a long time, is their over-reliance on concepts like nanotech, where suddenly, you can do just about anything with tiny little robots that make up your suit. You can magically put it on in seconds. And in this case, they're able to make gigantic holograms that are 100% convincing to the naked eye from every conceivable angle based on drones. And it just, it feels so fake to me, and I can't buy it as something that's real. And I can't suspend my disbelief anymore, just because there has to be a kernel of believability for me to buy into it, and there just wasn't. And
the hologram thing has been that's Mysterio's thing. Is like he is huge about holograms. Like he can orchestrate gigantic cataclysmic events just using his skills as a special effects director.
You know what? I would have bought even better if he had like mind control powers and he had the ability to convince people that they were seeing things. That would be more believable to me than him making gigantic holograms. That, by the way, here's a question. How come the holograms are capable of wanton destruction? I mean, how do they make, like, when the rock monster that's not real punches something, I know the drones have guns on them, but how are the drones capable of making the city actually get destroyed in a way that looks like something was punching as opposed to shooting?
The drones have concussive blasts as well.
Okay. All right. I must have missed that line. Still, it's concussive blast. How does that work? What is a concussive blast?
It's how Peter blew up like 20 drones at once.
Okay.
Climax. I mean,
someday I want to.
It's a Marvel movie. It's you got to get a little suspension of disbelief.
And I can. The Ween suit in Homecoming was completely impractical and not realistic, but I bought it enough. It doesn't take much to convince me to suspend my disbelief of things, but there are certain elements that push that limit too much, which is making a giant creature out of holograms, which holographic technology is just like, I guess what bothers me is these movies are set in ostensibly a present day kind of experience, and that they push the technology way further than is even.
Well, you got to remember that this technology was designed by Tony Stark. This is Stark technology.
Well, actually, the hologram was not designed by Tony Stark. It was designed by Jake Gyllenhaal. And Tony Stark took... By the way, now Tony Stark is automatically not a genius because he didn't create the holographic technology, but he took credit for it. He's essentially Thomas Edison. He's
right. You're right.
Stealing people's inventions. So now this movie retcons me into liking Tony Stark a little bit less.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's the point. I mean, it gives Quentin Beck some agency and some motivation as a character. But yeah, no, I misspoke. That Tony Stark didn't design it, but you see in Iron Man. It was Civil War, right? Civil War that Iron Man is using that technology as a way to talk to his parents. It's a very convincing technology. It's way beyond its time. And it kind of displays Mysterio's skill as a special effects artist, especially when you see his other illusions that he creates for Spider-Man later in the movie.
It's one thing to convince you that he can make a small room 100% convincing. It's another thing to blow that up to the size of fucking London.
He does have like 1,000 drones, though.
Yeah. By the way, I am writing a review for this movie, and one of my beers is take a drink every time the word drone is said. God damn, is it said so often in this
That's
movie.
a good one.
Yeah. And by the way, I really do want to move beyond this aspect of it, because that's not even my biggest issue with the movie. My biggest issue with the movie is how it treats the Minion characters who are supporting Beck and supporting, the Mysterio story. There's this reveal scene where which might be one of the laziest bits of character, like forced character development, where Jake Gyllenhaal monologues pointing to all of his cronies and telling them what their backstory is, as opposed to the movie revealing to you, the reasons these people might be teaming up. It's just, this is you, and your backstory is this. This is you, and your backstory is this. Do you remember how shitty it was when Tony Stark did this to you? Yeah, it just...
I kind of like that.
It
like,
felt...
yay, Janice, she wrote the script for Mysterio being an off-world warrior, and it's like, it was dumb, but I kind of liked it. Like,
okay.
I'm not sure if I could see a more organic way of that being revealed. Like, I don't really, like, if you could, can you think of another way how, so like one of the guys is who by the way, it was pointed out to me, is Ralphie from A Christmas Story, was Jeff Bridges' lackey in the first Iron Man. When he grabbed him, was like, he built this in a cave from scraps, and now he's working for Mysterio. In that reveal, like that kind of like call out, like literally call out during his monologue.
I'd be okay if there was one of those, just to give you an idea of that. But the fact that he goes one by one and points out every person backing him up and tells you the backstory, it felt like they couldn't come up with a more creative way to do it.
But at the same time, like the way the movie did it, like he stepped up on the top of the bar and they were doing a toast. Like it's kind of like an office party. That's how an office party would play out, where they call out people that were responsible for their success.
Yeah. Well, okay, to an extent. Although I will say that at an office party, generally the people in there know why they're being honored, and so they don't go into the full. It's sort of like how a movie like set in a historical period will often take their time to comment on something that people will recognize from that historic period, just to remind you of when the movie takes place. And it's completely unnecessary for you to push that, and as opposed to revealing it in, more subtle ways.
I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. But like at my office, if I'm hosting a meeting or something and I want to call somebody out, I will specifically call them out and say exactly what they did. I mean, it makes them feel good. It makes everybody else feel good. So, I mean, I kind of see that. That's just where I'm coming from, though.
Okay, yeah. And by the way, you're not wrong for enjoying this movie. That's fine. I didn't buy into it, and I'm tired of this formula. And this movie did nothing to sell me on it being something new and exciting from the MCU, and especially after a movie as creatively just frivolous and just like throw every turn of Into the Spider-Verse throws something new and exciting at you. This feels like such a fucking letdown. And I honestly kind of felt that way a little bit about even Endgame, where I mean I enjoyed Endgame, but there's something so cookie cutter to this. It makes it feel shit. I ought to put this in my review. It makes it feel decaffeinated. Speaking of someone who can only drink decaffeinated coffee right now, that means a fucking lot.
I mean, it's
not the same.
I am kind of biased because Jake Gyllenhaal is one of my absolute favorite actors. I think he's incredible. I think he's so talented. And Mysterio is my second favorite Spider-Man villain after Dr. Octopus. So I went into this movie with a huge bias. Like I love Mysterio, I love Jake Gyllenhaal. So seeing Jake Gyllenhaal have his monologue and actually like everybody was like, "Oh, why is Jake Gyllenhaal Mysterio? Like, who cares?" And then when you see the movie, you're like, "Oh my god, he is monologuing. He is crazy. He is absolutely nuts." Like this role is tailored to Jake Gyllenhaal because he's allowed to just go crazy monologuing. And
I know people
he
rip on the
nails
Marvel
the role.
movies for being over long, but I would have liked a little more character development with Jake Gyllenhaal, because one thing they really like, there's the throwaway line where he was fired from Stark Industries for being borderline crazy, and there's only one scene in the movie that I think fully like even hints at how off his rocker he is, when he turns the gun on one of his own people. And I think there should have been a little bit more of a megalomaniac buildup. There should have been something, maybe one or two beats more to that character than he got. He doesn't show up in the movie nearly as often as I had hoped he would.
I'm still not entirely convinced that that he's dead.
Well, that's the easy thing to do in this case is not actually kill him, because the magical realism that they threw in here with his hologram technology, he could pretty much do whatever he wants.
I mean, the Edith glasses did tell him that there were no illusions in place, but that could have easily been some kind of
Part of the illusion.
Part of the illusion, or some kind of failsafe that Quentin installed in the thing. But like, I obviously this series is setting up a Sinister Six. You've already got Vulture, you've got Scorpion, you've got Mysterio, and then I think John Watts wants to add Kraven the Hunter.
Shit, I think I just realized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I just figured out another potential plot hole here. So when Peter Parker handed the glasses that have the control of the Tony Stark satellite shit, when he handed it to Beck, he had to basically go through this process of surrendering control over to him.
Yeah.
But when Peter Parker takes the glasses from Beck, he just immediately is able to take back control. Beck doesn't have to surrender control of things back to Peter Parker. It's just automatic. And so, and they established before that there's like a whole security process in this. And
right.
So, I'm sorry, that's,
I don't think it's a plot hole. I think that's deliberate. So you see, there's a lot of setup in this movie where, like, for example, in the second post-credit scene, it's revealed that Nick Fury and Maria Hill are not themselves. They're just the Skrulls from Captain Marvel. And so there's a point earlier in the movie where Maria Hill always acts kind of weird in the movie. Like, she never really felt like her character, and it felt kind of off, and that's because she's a Skrull. And also when Peter asks, why can't we call Captain Marvel? Nick Fury says, "Do not invoke her name." That's weird, right? But the reason that he says that is because it's Talos who's saying, "Don't invoke her name," because he's, had that history with Captain Marvel. So I think that's a very deliberate thing, a detail that may hint at something later where Mysterio dying is not a thing. Like,
so speaking as someone who skipped Captain Marvel, that entire final part of the film made no sense to me. And like that entire post-credit moment, I was like, who are these guys all of a sudden showing up? So yeah, I admit that's my bad, because I did skip Captain Marvel. I also didn't feel interested enough to find out who they were. So I don't know what that says, but I will.
Yeah.
I will say the first post-credit, or sort of mid-credit scene, I did thoroughly enjoy, simply because it's the return of J. Jonah motherfucking Jameson.
Yeah, that was great.
And as he should be, he's played by Just Kidding Simmons.
Oh, shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, J.K. Simmons comes back as Jameson. I did not know.
And they modernized him in a wonderful way, where he's basically like he's basically like a Fox News anchor now.
He's literally Alex Jones.
Yeah, there we go. He's Alex Jones.
And this was actually pulled from the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game.
Mhm.
As you play the PS4 Spider-Man game, you swing around, and very frequently Jameson will come on a podcast and scream about Spider-Man and complain about stuff. And it's actually an option in the game to unsubscribe from that. It was a really funny touch. But yeah, it's
By the way,
interesting how they did that modern touch where he's not just a news reporter who's angry and wants photos of Spider-Man. He's an InfoWars podcast commentator who is angry about Spider-Man.
Which makes this the second movie that is a superhero-ish kind of movie this year that does a really funny cameo at the end involving an InfoWars joke. Because Brightburn has that wonderful cameo at the end with Michael Rooker as the Big T doing his Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was a film that was produced by James Gunn and written by his brothers. So there's some incestuous Marvel MCU sort of stuff in there too.
Yeah.
What now? If you really want to sell me on the next Spider-Man movie, bring the Brightburn universe into Spider-Man and bring Michael Rooker and J. Jonah Jameson together as dueling Alex Jones stereotypes.
Now,
who will out Jones the other?
Yes. So apparently, in the contract, if Spider-Man: Far From Home does not break $1 billion,
You said "fart from home" for a second.
If it doesn't break $1 billion,
Such a child.
It will the actual the control of Spider-Man will revert exclusively back to Sony.
Ooh.
So hopefully it does. I mean, I think it will. It's already made like 600 million worldwide, 580, something like that.
It broke records, so it's going to. That's
It'll be fine.
And by the way, Sony doesn't want to take this out of the hands of Marvel. They know they've been fucking up.
I don't know about that, but
they have. Here's the thing: the Spider-Verse movie made plenty of money, and they managed to do that right. So they should stick with that and let the Marvel, and let Disney, let Disney make money for them, basically.
Absolutely should, yeah.
I mean, it's like zero investment on their part. They just have the name. Amy Pascal puts her Pascal Films name on it. That's it.
Yes.
All right. So, any final thoughts on the movie?
No.
All right. So, Midsummer. Well, am I the only one who saw this? Did you see this?
No, I saw it today, yeah.
Oh, you did see it today. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so good. So, first of all,
I ain't watching that shit.
A 2.5 hour sort of existential crisis horror movie that is set mostly in Sweden. Are you saying that this movie's inaccessible, Bill?
Not for me.
So what did you think, Hawk?
I really, really liked it. Although I don't think it needed to be 2.5 hours long. It's telling a very simple story. It's telling a very, very simple story. And I think there are a lot of parts that are drawn out very effectively. But when I got out of it, I was like, I really liked it. But I was like, man, that movie was really fucking long. Even though when I was watching it, I didn't really feel its length.
That's the thing. I didn't feel the length of the movie. I think it's very deliberately paced, admittedly, but there's something about it that makes you want to keep watching.
Yeah. A lot of the long takes and stuff like that were really, really good. There is a kind of sense of unease to it. I'm one of the people that didn't think that Hereditary was really all that scary. Like I thought Hereditary was really good, but I'm not really into the hype of it.
I liked Hereditary a lot, and I just think that the ending kind of blew its wad for me. I didn't fully buy where it went in that final sequence.
No, I agree. Hereditary kind of sets itself up to be something really, really huge, and then kind of drops into a relatively generic sort of finale.
And I will say the finale of Midsummer is better earned for me.
Yes.
I really appreciated it. So let's get into a little bit of what Midsummer's about. So the movie opens up with this sort of college age girl named Danny who is going through kind of a tough time. She has some emotional problems, and she has a sister who is even more emotionally unstable. And it sets up that she has a really rocky relationship with her boyfriend Christian, who is they pretty much establish he's getting ready to dump her. And then suddenly something truly fucked up happens when Danny's sister commits suicide and makes it a murder suicide, killing both of her parents at the same time.
That was a
Truly fucked up scene.
that was really effective. That was that really made me uneasy.
Yeah, she basically what she does is while her parents sleep, she turns the car on in the garage and hooks up a series of both cars, and hooks up a series of hoses so that the house is filled with carbon monoxide smoke. And there's this wonderful tracking shot that follows the hoses as you see it, leads into the bedroom with the parents. And then you see it leads into her room, and the sister made damn sure she was the first one killed because she fucking duct tapes the hoses to her face.
And then she duct taped the bottom of the door to her parents' rooms so that the hose the smoke wouldn't come out of the
so the carbon monoxide fumes just filled their room.
Yeah.
And as they slept, so they probably
they died peacefully.
Peacefully, but in a fucked up way by their own at the hand.
The movie opens with her trying to call them.
Right. Yeah, and that's the really horrifying thing is because her sister sent her a really scary email, and because her sister has a series of has bipolar disorder, it's not uncommon for her to send scary emails. And speaking as someone who has a friend who is bipolar, yes, sometimes they say things where you're like, did you actually mean what you just said? Because that's really scary.
Her message said, let's see, something like it's all darkness now. My parents are coming to, goodbye, or something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, fast forward because this took place in winter. Fast forward to summer, and Danny finds out that her boyfriend Christian has been planning a trip for a long time and not told her. And Christian stayed with her and decided not to dump her, mostly out of the obligation feeling of having to take care of, to take care of her through the dark time where, her, fucking sister murdered her parents.
So I want to really quickly backtrack to the sequence after she discovers her parents and sister have died.
Uh-huh.
And Christian is holding her on the couch as she's just wailing. Like Florence Pugh has she's a good stage crier. Like it's really heart-wrenching to hear her cry like that.
Oh yeah.
And you get this very, very slow zoom towards the window of their house or of their apartment as the snow's falling outside. And it keeps going, and you see the snow falling, and then you have the opening credits. A24 presents an Ari Aster film, and then like the actors, and then the title card. All as the snow is falling, the snow kind of obscures the title cards, as there's the score of the violins and stuff just like wails and wails, and it really, really ramps up the tension of the rest of the movie.
Right. So anyway, Danny finds out that her boyfriend has been planning this trip and didn't tell her. And the trip is basically he's in college, and he's studying for a PhD in anthropology. And he and a few of his roommates are planning a trip to Sweden to take part in the midsummer celebration that is occurring in the ancestral commune home of one of their schoolmates who's also who's Swedish. And it's this small village in rural Sweden, and they keep to some very old traditions. So anyway, again, out of guilt, Christian invites Danny to come with, despite the objections of most of his friends. And Christian is kind of a I don't like saying this about people, but he's kind of a pussy. He can't man up and actually say what he needs to say. So instead, he lies to people because it's easier.
Yes.
And
this is really the movie's depiction of relationships is really uncomfortable because
and accurate in a lot of ways.
Inaccurate, like, you know, because
everyone knows that relationship where, you know, they shouldn't be together anymore, but neither of them wants to pull the trigger on it.
It's not even an abusive relationship. It's just like they're not right for each other. Like,
no,
you know, yeah. Where, like, you know, she finds out at the party that they're going to Sweden, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm just finding about this now," and he's like, "Oh, sorry," and she says, "You know, you say sorry, but it's kind of like you're saying too bad." And he's going to leave, and she grabs like, "No, I don't want to leave. Sit down with me. I want to talk this. I'm not mad at you. I want to know why. You know, I'm excited for you, but I want to know why you are just telling me about this now." And it's a really, I know Ari Aster wrote this after he got out of a bad relationship.
That shows.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Like, there are some painful conversations in this movie. These people are obviously in a very bad relationship. They're not hurting each other, but they're just
emotionally, it's
right
one of the most abusive relationships I've ever seen. And
abusive, but not in the way you would normally think.
Yeah, not a physically abusive, but they're incompatible emotionally in that neither of them really knows how to treat the other one in a way that is fair. And as a result, what ends up happening, because of this mutual misunderstanding of each other, they're constantly hurting each other's feelings. And it's not necessarily, you know, you can't say either of them is more culpable than the other, because Danny is also, she has some unaddressed emotional problems, and she probably isn't in the right headspace to be in any kind of a relationship at this point. She's more like in a relationship right now because she feels the need to have some kind of connection to people. And that's not a healthy way for romance to blossom. And I can say that from experience. So yeah, it's one of those things where they find themselves on this trip to Sweden, and when they get to this village, they are introduced to it in a really, you know, bohemian way, in that their Swedish friend pulls out a bag of mushrooms, and so they take some mushrooms before going into the village, and she has just the worst of bad trips.
Well, I want to sort of also point out that he did want to try to support her. Like, she wasn't quite ready. She's like, "Oh, I'm jet lagged. I want to kind of find my footing first." And he wanted to wait for her, but then his friends were kind of getting the shit for it. And then she succumbed to them. And then he still wanted to be like, "Oh, I want to wait." But then she was like, "No, it's fine." And then she peer pressured him into trying the mushrooms. Like, there's this whole interplay between her, him, and his friends is really, really toxic because they don't like her.
I mentioned that he doesn't have any backbone. She also has that problem.
Well, yeah, like, all he does is bend to everybody else. Like, there's not, I don't think, a single moment in this movie where he actually stands up for himself.
Right.
Even to the point where the book vanished from the temple, he's like, "Oh, I just want to point out that we're not even friends with them." Like, all he does is just puss out to everybody else in this movie.
Passing the buck.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so anyway, they get to this village, and you know, you see the traditions of this village as they're preparing for this midsummer festival, which is something that this village holds every 90 years. And it starts off innocent enough. You see some of the activities, and it's, you know, not unlike some things you might have seen on freaking Lonely Planet on PBS. You know, where you're seeing the interesting cultural experiences of being in the Swedish village. But as time goes on, little elements start bleeding in where you're like, that's not right. This is going a little bit further than it probably should. I think your first hint of that is when you see the mural that shows the mural that shows how the girl seduced a guy, which she seduces a guy.
That got me pretty good.
Yeah, that basically there's this mural in or tapestry that's hung up that shows this girl clipping a pube from her, putting it in food that this guy eats, and then bleeding menstrual blood into his drink, and that hypnotizes him into fucking her.
You notice that Christian's beverage was slightly more
red than everyone else's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what the fuck, dude?
He doesn't notice it, and everyone it's so obvious. Oh,
he's like he
drinks it right down.
He notices the pubic hair in his meat pie, but he doesn't. He
his hair pie
drinks that shit down when he takes a drink of his.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah. So that's fucked up. And then to add to things, they find out that on the next day of this festival, they're going to witness what is called an Atastupa ritual, which is a it's an ancient Scandinavian ritual, which I actually had to do some Googling, and it was common in some pagan societies and like Icelandic societies, like a Viking thing, where the elders in a village, when they reach an age of infirmity, where they determined that there's an age where at this point they can no longer contribute to the society, so they ritualistically kill themselves by flinging themselves off of a rock.
Yeah.
And that happens here. So an elder woman and an elder man jump off a cliff right in front of everyone and basically get their fucking faces smashed in. And in one case, when the guy flings himself, he doesn't die right away from it. So they bring in a hammer and they smash the guy's face in repeatedly to make sure that he's gone. And then as the American and British tourists in this village are freaking the fuck out because they weren't warned in advance that this was a thing that was going to happen, the elders of the village reassure them, this is tradition, this is something we've done for generations, this is good for the village. And a couple of them decide, fuck it, we're out. And a couple of them decide, you know what, let's stick around and enjoy the rest of these traditions, because what in hell is happening? Okay, Hawk, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. God damn, that was loud. What the fuck was that?
I think it was coming from Bill.
Yeah, it did stop when you muted him. Bill? You okay? Bill Leon, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you switch to a different mic?
Yeah, I think my cord shorted out. This microphone's probably.
Yeah, I think it fucking did.
Yeah, my ears have officially been accosted. Holy crap.
I'm sorry. Yeah, good lord.
Yeah,
For all those listening, make sure that you hit mute about
a minute and a half ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Holy crap. Wow, that threw me off my game. I forgot where I was.
Speaking of sound, the score for Midsommar was really fucking good.
Yes, and by the way, very appropriate that the name of the musician behind the music for this is the Haxan Cloak.
Which Ari Aster was listening to when he wrote the script for Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he thought it was a natural fit for Midsummer.
Yeah, well, that is a wonderfully like Celtic name, and it's it's fitting for a Scandinavian, or not Celtic, but what's whatever. The word Haxan is Swedish for witch, I believe. So anyway, so. I'm sorry. That sound really threw me off. What where were we in the movie?
I don't know what caused it. I think this microphone is just shitty. Like I have to stick static. Like I moved my laptop a few inches, and I think the cord. Yeah, I don't know. That's why I don't use this microphone very often.
It may be time to get a new microphone.
I have the webcam one, but the webcam one wasn't working.
Yeah. So, without going, this is a long movie, so rather than summarizing the rest of the plot, I'm going to go ahead and just point out a few of the other images that occur in this film. So, so you see some faces smashed in. You see a blood eagle, which, if you don't know what a blood eagle is, there's a whole medieval history behind this.
Blood angel over here.
Yeah. Well, a blood eagle is a method of execution that was done in which a victim is basically severed from like rib to spine with a tool, and their lungs pulled through the opening, making it look like wings. And the neat thing about this practice is the person's alive while the process is happening. So it's a very pleasant way to kill someone. So you get to see one of those. And holy shit, it's fucked up. You see a person shoved into the skin of a bear and then set on fire.
That was less graphic than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by that point, everything was so surreal. I mean, one thing I loved, speaking of surreal images in this film, is there are moments throughout the film not unlike, interestingly enough, the movie A Field in England.
Yeah.
As soon as the mushrooms are taken, this movie gets trippy as shit. And there are moments where you see like trees pulsating in the background. And you can't tell, like, are those trees just moving in the breeze? Or is this some sort of like, or are we seeing the after effects of psilocybin or something? So that's something that you get. And another thing that's wonderful about this movie is this village. At no time does anyone in this village seem like demonic or particularly evil. They are just happy Swedish people. And I mean, the only time you really see someone angry is when one guy witnesses one of the tourists pissing on an ash pile that turns out to be the ashes of their fallen ancestors. And that's the only time you see anyone angry, and you can totally understand why he's angry.
Yeah.
So,
although I do want to, like, one thing that occurred to me is that Pele, he mentions that his parents died in a fire. Mm-hmm. Could his parents have been killed in a ritualistic fire, similar to the ending of this movie?
I would say possibly, although they do say that this ritual only happens once every 90 years. But then again, we don't know what other rituals this village goes through.
That being said, I think that ritual only refers to the jumping off the cliff.
Hmm. Oh, no, the jumping off the cliff happens. That happens more than every 90 years. That happens every time they get to...
It happens what?
Every time they get to 72, I believe.
75.
75? Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So...
I don't know. Like, it seems suspicious that he said that his parents died in a fire.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing. this is just the midsummer ritual. This village probably has a shitload of other rituals.
Yeah. I know that there's something on Reddit, like this guy was saying that the rituals shown in this movie are pulled from a number of other rituals that he knows about throughout different cultures and mythologies. Mm-hmm. So there could be many others that occur at other points along time.
Well, there's a lot of Northern European influence behind it. Like the thing about the rituals that take place in this film is there is no one single Swedish religious organization that practice all of these, but there are a lot. Like every ritual that occurs in this movie is based on something that actually happened in European history.
Yeah.
And I actually, by the way, this might be a good way to continue on this. I found an article from BBC News that was just posted 9 hours ago called "Midsummer: What Do Film Critics in Sweden Think?" And it has some interesting comments here. So here's a comment from a guy named Aftonbladet, which is Sweden's biggest tabloid. It says, "Everything is comically rural. Everything in the film is well thought out, and traditional paintings and log cabins that will make us think of Swedish traditions. Of course, it is also quite twisted." Another quote from a daily newspaper in Sweden's city of Gothenburg. It says here about it, "It has to be said, surely this is about cultural appropriation. I have nothing against the idea of gamely borrowing from other cultures. Still, I shift uneasily in the cinema seat. Are you really allowed to deface the nicest thing we have, Midsummer, to this degree?" And then another Swedish critic wrote, "Is it really okay to distort Swedish traditions like this before an international audience? Play up the image of Swedes as a homogenous and strange little people in the north? The answer is, of course, a resounding yes." Which I think is an interesting way to put it. And then this last one I really enjoy. So one of Sweden's biggest daily newspapers described Midsummer as an entertaining horror film in a fantasy version of Sweden. He says, there is an exhilarating exoticism in Astor's film that has a specific entertainment value for Swedish spectators. It is fun to consider Hälsingland, where this film takes place, as a place as frightening as the rainforest and cannibal holocaust. So really, in general, while mildly critical about it, the way it makes Sweden look, most of the Swedish newspapers seem to be on board with this movie.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But yeah, it's there are some critics that are a little bit more harsh on it, but really the point of this article is one of the better quotes here. One critic for a Swedish paper called the movie more bonkers than it is unpleasant.
I mean, yeah, that's true. Like, I heard a lot of what was going on with the violence in the movie, and the actual content of the film was less graphic than what I had imagined after reading about it. And there are a lot of really funny moments too, like when Will Poulter's character has a bad trip. It's like, "Oh, I need to lay down. Everybody lay down. I don't want new people here. Like, I don't like this." Like, it's funny. Like, there are a lot of funny moments of the movie.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing Ari Aster seems to bring into all of his movies is this awkward humor where you're not sure if you should be laughing or if you should be fucking petrified in fear.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel both at the same time, and it doesn't make sense to feel both, but he finds a way to make it that way. And this movie especially has these moments of strange humor that catch you by surprise because, you know, you've just seen someone's face stoved in.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this movie thoroughly. I still think Ari Aster has yet to make a fully masterful movie. He has a masterpiece in him, and I can't wait for it to happen. But damn, is his film craft tight.
Oh yeah, editing wise, production design. I mean, on a technical level, his movies are incredible. Like the scene transitions in this movie, the editing, the way that it just kind of flows is really, really just off the charts. Like Disney is really going to try to scoop him up for a Marvel movie.
Oh God, I hope they don't. Please,
I hope they don't
do not do a mega budget movie. Just keep making your movies the way you want to make them.
Yeah. And I hope he does. I hope if Marvel approaches him, he'll say no thank you, because he has a really incredible grasp of just the look of his films. Like, they just, both Hereditary and Midsommar have this distinct style to them. They're both very different in terms of style, but they're both very singular in terms of being from him.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
well,
and even the strange thing about the Johnsons, you can easily point to as an early example of his style really fully formed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this guy knows exactly what he's doing.
Were you going to say something, Billy? I'm sorry.
I was going to point out, like, I mean, it's going mainstream like that is most of the time a problem, but like, look at how James Gunn has kind of come into his own more as a filmmaker after having made films like that are just so unique to him. But like, he didn't lose his touch going the mainstream Marvel route.
And that's true, but I will say that
it's a rarity.
Yeah, and I will say that he's definitely in the minority amongst those. Most of them have had to make serious compromises. I think the difference with James Gunn is he went in with Guardians knowing that rather than having to make compromises, I think he already had compromises in mind for how he would make it. So So whereas other Marvel films by interesting directors have felt like they were told somewhere mid-process that they had to take this out or take that out, I have a feeling James Gunn has had to delete very little from his movies at the request of Disney, because I think he has a very good idea of what will be acceptable and how he can make a film that works within his realm without compromising that vision.
On top of that, the characters he's working with, nobody knew who the fuck they were before those movies.
So he had a lot of freedom there too. Very good.
Yeah.
And since the Guardians of the Galaxy are separated from the rest of the MCU because they spend very little time doting on Earth, he can kind of make up shit, and that's perfectly okay. Having rewatched Guardians 2 recently, it actually held up better than I thought it would. I liked it more on my second viewing.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing a Guardians 2 t-shirt right now. You can't see it, but
yeah, I'm still not fully sold on. I would say what works in Guardians 2 it really works, but there's a few things. I think it was a mistake to make the movie combine the subplot involving the Ravagers and the plot involving the God Planet. I think those could have been two separate movies altogether. But that's a story for another day. Okay. Any other final thoughts on Midsommar? I guess not.
No, I mean, I liked it. Like, somebody on Reddit said that at the very end of the movie, Florence Pugh turned into a Pokemon.
Yes. Okay. The flower costume.
Yeah, the flower costume.
Yeah. It's ridiculous, and yet I've actually that's something that's like right out of European, like ancient European traditions. I've seen that in like design in a painting somewhere. I gotta figure out what it was, but yeah, it's fascinating how well researched the movie was, considering I'm pretty sure he just started writing it in May of last year.
Yeah,
so he didn't have a lot of time to put it together.
Rumors is that he had a spec script from years ago that he was kind of like commissioned to write, and then he was kind of sitting on it for a while, and then Hereditary was a huge hit, and then he kind of dug it back up and did a little bit of retweaking and then just made it, because the movie was greenlit in June of 2018 and then released, now.
Yeah.
Like, a 1 year turnaround is like ridiculous for this movie.
It definitely has that feeling of, he's really hot now. So what have you got? Do you got a script for us? And, if you can make it for under 5 million or under 10 million, we'll do it. And I guess the movie was made for 10 million. So yeah, there you go.
And the big thing is that this movie, the grief is really impactful. Like the early scene, the very early scene where Danny is reading the text messages from her sister, and then she calls Christian.
Mhm.
And that whole thing is done in one shot where she's wiping her eyes, talking to him, and you can tell on his side of the conversation he really isn't into it. He doesn't really know how to deal with it.
Mhm.
And she's tearing up and wiping her eyes, and then she recovers. Like that whole thing, like Florence Pugh just fucking nails it in this movie. It's an incredible performance.
Yeah.
Like Ari Aster really pulls out good performances from his actors, and I'm excited to see him do more work. Like he did say that Midsommar is going to be his last horror film for a while.
I think it's probably a good idea. I mean, he doesn't want to squarely put himself in just the horror vein.
Yeah.
And this movie was not the runaway success that Hereditary was financially. I mean, it has it wasn't too heavily promoted, and it's past its budget. It's like 13 million, and it has not had its international release yet. And this is a movie that I think might do very well in Europe.
Yeah.
Less so in China and stuff, but I think it'll do well in Europe. So it'll probably pull a profit, but it's not going to be Hereditary made way more money than it probably should have, given what kind of movie it was. Mostly because it was really, really brilliantly marketed and inaccurately marketed.
Yeah.
And Midsommar also, they kind of, the problem with Midsommar is I don't know how they would have inaccurately marketed this film, because it's a hard film to market in any way. Anyway, I will say credit where credit's due. I'm so glad Jack Reynor finally has another solid acting credit in his book, because he's criminally underrated and he doesn't get the roles that he deserves. And that's kind of my final thought on that.
Yeah, no, he was good. He was very good.
Yeah, because he was. Let me put it this way: this is a guy who he was in Free Fire, he was in Sing Street, he was in Macbeth. He was great in those. But when people think Jack Reynor, they think Jack Reynor of Age of Extinction.
Right, exactly. And he was
shit, he was also in Detroit. I gotta mention Detroit too.
Oh yeah, he was.
Yeah, and he was great in that too.
What else was he in? Like, I have a friend who went to school with him.
Mowgli. He was in fucking Mowgli. You had a friend who went to school with Jack Reynor?
Yeah, I know Jack Reynor.
Oh, he was born in Longmont, Colorado. So
yeah. No, I've never met Jack Reynor, but I know him through one other person. So like, I could probably like say hi to him or something.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah. Like he was in something else that was very.
I seriously thought he was. Oh, you know what? Okay, so he was born and raised in Longmont, Colorado, but I guess he has an Irish mother. No wonder in Sing Street he pulled off such a convincing Irish accent. That's hard for an American to do.
Yeah, he's Irish for sure.
Yeah. All right.
He was in Free Fire. That's right.
Oh, and he was in Dollhouse.
The show?
Yeah, the show Dollhouse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Kristen Sheridan. That's a good not actress, a good writer. She's done some interesting stuff, in America. I don't know if you've seen. Have you seen In America?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, either way, it's a movie that's worth watching. But that said,
time to wrap it up.
Yeah, we may as well
wrap it up.
I unfortunately cannot come up with an awkward moment to stop it, so I'm just going to hit stop.